Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. A week after moving into his dream smart home, tech entrepreneur Trevor Drake finds a red envelope on his gate, marked urgent. Within days, he's locked out, hunted by a ruthless HOA queenpin, and forced into a digital war to defend his home, his name, and everything he built. I was barely a week into living in my new place when the first red envelope appeared, stamped URGENT in capital letters like it had been ripped from a Cold War military dispatch. It was taped, not even mailed to my front gate. That was my first red flag. The second was that it came from Carmel Hills Homeowners Association, a name I vaguely remembered from the neighborhood brochure, the one I ignored because I had paid for the damn property in full, outside their little net of monthly dues and block. Party committees. I wasn't even supposed to be on their registry, but that didn't stop them from trying to make me their problem. The envelope was thick. I opened it in my foyer, still half covered in drywall dust from installing new wall-mounted touch panels for the security system. The letter was printed on heavy ivory stock like it had been spat out of some angry printer at Versailles. I read it once, then twice. My brain stalled somewhere between pending internal review of ownership legitimacy and concerns regarding the maturity and cultural suitability of the current resident. My name, Trevor Drake, was on it in full. They weren't talking about some prior owner, they were talking about me. For a moment, I genuinely thought it was a prank, maybe some strange, passive-aggressive welcome to the neighborhood ritual. I even laughed out loud and looked around like someone was going to pop out from behind a bush with a YouTube camera. Nothing, just the faint chirp of my smart gate locking behind me. I shook it off, scanned the letter into my Records app, and replied the next day via email and certified mail, attaching the deed, title transfer, full purchase documents, and a personal note that read, in essence, I am not, nor have I ever been, under the jurisdiction of the Carmel Hills HOA. Kindly update your records and don't contact me again. That should have been the end of it. I had bought this place with money my startup had earned after 3 years of caffeine-fueled war rooms, data breaches, and surviving 6 rounds of venture funding. This house, this smart, solar-powered, hyper-secure slice of modern architecture, was my reward. It stood on a private lot, built before the HOA swallowed the rest of the hill. I had the surveys and zoning maps to prove it. But 2 days later, the gate wouldn't open. I rolled up in my Tesla after a day of meetings, trying not to spill my iced espresso on the console, only to find the smart keypad flashing red. Access denied. I tried again. Denied. Then the app. Still denied. My own house had turned on me. Or rather, someone had cut off my remote privileges. I climbed the side path manually, heart pounding, not out of fear, but rage. By the time I got inside, none of the shared services were working. My Wi-Fi uplink was severed from the HOA grid. Trash wasn't picked up that morning. Even the water line had lower pressure than usual. At first, I thought it was a glitch in the smart hub, but diagnostics showed everything was functioning internally. Someone somewhere had limited access upstream. That's when the doorbell chimed. It was afternoon, heat shimmering off the stone driveway, and standing in front of my matte black door were 2 people. A man in a polo shirt with HOA stitched on the chest in blue, and a woman who radiated menace like a politician in heels. 50-something, with that permanently smug Botox-adjacent expression. She didn't introduce herself, just stared at me like I was a cockroach in a champagne flute. I assume you received our notice, she said. Her voice was honey-glazed condescension. Karen Hatch. The man beside her added quickly, gesturing to her like she was a celebrity guest judge. President of the Carmel Hills HOA. I held my ground. I responded to it. Legally. Thoroughly, Karen stepped forward, not waiting for an invitation, her heels clacking on the slate tiles like a countdown to something terrible. We're here to offer a soft solution before this goes further. It's in everyone's best interest, soft solution. She actually produced a manila envelope and held it out like a peace treaty. Temporary transfer of property access to HOA supervision pending investigation. You'll retain technical ownership, of course, but we'll manage the property until a final decision is reached. I didn't take the envelope. I didn't even blink. What kind of final decision? Well, she said, voice syrupy and venomous all at once. There are questions. About how a person your age could afford a house like this. About the implications for our community values. Fraud is sadly not uncommon these days. Crypto schemes, offshore laundering. It's not personal, Trevor. We're protecting the character of Carmel Hills. I smiled, not a nice smile. I built a cybersecurity platform currently used by 3 Fortune 500 companies, I said. It's on the cover of Wired this month. I paid cash. You're standing on a deed that's bulletproof. And if you don't leave my property right now, I will consider this trespassing. Karen didn't flinch, but her lackey shifted uncomfortably. She dropped the envelope on my welcome mat. You'll regret being uncooperative, she said. I tilted my head. Try me. They turned and left. I didn't pick up the envelope, just stood there, watching them leave through the gate. I couldn't open myself anymore. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. The next morning, I was woken not by an alarm, but by a malfunction. My smart blinds usually lifted themselves around 7 sharp, synchronized with sunrise and my light therapy lamp. Today, they stayed shut, dead silent. My app wouldn't connect. My security system, my garage, my irrigation, all offline. Not jammed, not glitched, disconnected. Someone had manually rerouted my external access. And I had a pretty good guess who. I pulled on a hoodie, grabbed my tablet, and started digging through network logs while sipping burnt coffee. Internal systems were still intact. My internal servers, routers, and cameras had all been running autonomously. It wasn't a breach. It was a coordinated shutdown of every shared HOA connected node. Even my utilities were toggled through their municipal API partner, Carmel Hills Digital. They'd shut me out at the source. At precisely 9:15, the gate bell chimed again. I debated ignoring it. I really did, but curiosity got the better of me, so I opened the live camera feed, and there she was again. Karen Hatch, in a cream-colored suit and oversized sunglasses, holding a clipboard like a suburban executioner. This time, she was alone. I stepped outside slowly, letting the front door stay open just enough for my cameras to record audio. She was already talking before I reached her. Mr. Drake, I've come today to clarify our position. After your hostile refusal yesterday, the Carmel Hills Board convened an emergency executive meeting. Did you? I said flatly, arms crossed. She nodded, lips pursed. We've issued a provisional decision. Effective immediately, we are rescinding your neighborhood access privileges until the legal status of your property is resolved. Your key fob has been deactivated. Gate entry is revoked. Trash collection and security services are suspended. You're bluffing, I said, even as I already knew she wasn't. Karen smiled without joy. You'll find we're very efficient. I don't fall under your HOA. That's what's in dispute. And until that dispute is resolved, the community must be protected. If it turns out your title is invalid and you've occupied this house illegally, well, the liability would be enormous. I stepped forward. You're making a mistake, Karen. This is targeted harassment. We prefer the term community stewardship, she said, and turned on her heel. I was still standing there when I saw her get into a white Range Rover, the license plate Chills 1 shimmering in the sunlight. She rolled down the window before leaving. Mr. Drake, she called out sweetly, this is your chance to avoid escalation. Sign the provisional transfer form. Let us manage this properly, otherwise we'll be forced to act further. And I'd really hate to see this become adversarial. By noon, I was locked out of every smart connected HOA service on the property, but that wasn't the worst of it. At 4:22 p.m., my security alert pinged. Not an intrusion, internal motion in the living room. I sprinted from my office upstairs expecting some kind of sensor glitch, maybe even a tech failure, but it wasn't a glitch. The door was open, the one I had locked. Standing in the middle of my living room were 2 people I had never seen before. Mid-30s, professionally dressed, holding tablets and walkie-talkies like they were on a real estate scouting mission. Can I help you? I snapped. One of them looked up, startled but not embarrassed. HOA inspection team, he said. We're here to conduct a visual property assessment as per Section 11.4 of the Carmel Hills Community Guidelines. I stared at them. This is my house, not yours, not the HOA's. You broke in. They didn't even flinch. Ma'am Hatch approved access. We used the master fob. I took one breath, then another. Then I walked to the kitchen and hit the emergency lockdown button beneath the island. A low mechanical hum rolled through the walls as all exits sealed. My system still had that override hardwired in. The 2 inspectors looked around in confusion. You're not going anywhere, I said. Not until the sheriff gets here. They didn't argue. But one of them had the audacity to mutter something about how the young ones always overreact. The sheriff's deputy showed up 20 minutes later and looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. He was polite, asked for IDs, made copies, and ultimately confirmed what I feared. HOA bylaws apparently included a clause allowing emergency inspection access in community emergencies. "But you're not a member of the HOA," the deputy said, flipping through my title and survey documents, "which means this probably shouldn't apply." "Probably?" he shrugged helplessly. "You'd need a civil lawyer. This kind of thing doesn't get solved by patrol units." I let the inspectors leave after he insisted they couldn't be held without charges. They walked out smug. Karen had weaponized bureaucracy like it was medieval law. That night, I called a lawyer. Her name was Erin Farrell, civil rights specialist, reputation for chewing HOAs into mulch. She didn't even flinch when I told her the situation. "Oh," she said, "another Karen. I think she's the queen of them. Perfect. I've been bored this month." We set up a meeting for the next morning. I sent her everything. Scans, logs, footage, legal filings, and when she called back, she had just 4 words. "They've made a mistake." The meeting with Erin happened the next morning in her office in Santa Clara. Top floor, glass walls, espresso machine that probably cost more than my car. She greeted me in jeans, boots, and a leather jacket, like she'd just walked off the set of a courtroom drama and was still waiting for her Emmy. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. Instead, she pointed at the pile of documentation I'd sent her the night before, all neatly laid out across a conference table. "I've seen worse," she said, "but not by much." Erin moved like someone used to verbal knife fights. She had that clipped tone lawyers get when they've already pre-written your victory speech in their head. She walked me through her plan. We would file a cease and desist immediately, citing unlawful trespassing, violation of private property rights, and targeted harassment under California Civil Code. Simultaneously, we'd serve a letter to the HOA demanding immediate cessation of all actions that interfered with my utilities and access. "But that's just the start," she said, tapping one page. "We also hit them on discrimination." I blinked. "Discrimination?" She nodded. "You're 25, successful, and you don't fit their mold. This isn't about bylaws. It's about image. HOA abuse cases often have a hidden bias layer. Age discrimination is real, and we're going to exploit every inch of it." I left her office feeling like I finally had backup. But I hadn't even reached the freeway when my phone lit up with a push notification from my security system. Unauthorized movement on my driveway. I pulled over and opened the live feed. Karen, with a goddamn microphone. She was standing in front of my gate giving some kind of speech. A small group of people had gathered behind her, residents probably, maybe 10 or 15, some holding coffee, others crossing their arms like an angry PTA mob. I tapped into the audio. "We must preserve the integrity of Carmel Hills," Karen was saying, "and unfortunately, that means standing against threats to our community cohesion. When someone unvetted gains access to a property that large, that valuable, without community oversight, we risk setting a dangerous precedent." She held up a folder. I recognized it, the same one she'd waved at me days ago. A faux dossier. She was reading from it now. "There are allegations," she continued with a calculated pause, "of financial irregularities, suspicious business practices, and unpermitted gatherings." What followed was a parade of slander so spectacularly fabricated I nearly laughed. According to Karen's fantasy file, I had hosted multiple late-night parties with questionable guests, been investigated for crypto fraud in Nevada, never been, and once employed a shell company to move money offshore, also news to me. Then came the cherry on top. She pulled out a blown-up photo of me at a tech convention taken completely out of context, where I was standing in front of a booth with a cocktail in one hand and a VR headset in the other. "This," she announced dramatically, "is not the behavior of a responsible homeowner." I couldn't believe it. She was holding a smear campaign in my driveway, live streaming it to what I now realized was a private HOA community Facebook group. I watched in real time as neighbors reacted in the comments, some skeptical, others eating it up. I called Erin. She didn't hesitate. "Good. Let her talk. We'll subpoena every pixel of that footage. This is defamation. We'll bury her." But it didn't stop there. That afternoon, I went to a local cafe for a meeting and came back to find a note taped to my windshield. It wasn't signed, just 3 words in Sharpie. "Get out, fraud." My neighbors had gone from passive to hostile. One of them, an older guy in cargo shorts, actually hissed at me as I walked past his garden. I wish I was kidding. Later that night, I took a walk around the block with a hoodie up, trying to cool my head. But as I approached my driveway, I noticed something wrong. The gate. The smart gate's camera had been yanked clean out of the wall. Wires dangled like torn nerves. Someone had ripped it out. I checked the rest of the perimeter. 2 more motion sensors had been smashed. One of the solar floodlights was cracked. I jogged back to the house, launched a full system scan, and pulled the logs. It wasn't a gang of teenagers. Whoever did it knew how to avoid direct lens contact, timed it with a blind zone. Professionals, or someone coached by one. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Aaron filed the first motion, a full cease and desist served with ice-cold formality. But even before we could start the clock on legal deadlines, another blow landed, a subpoena from the HOA, filed in county court. A formal request for a judicial review of ownership legitimacy under Special Provision 17.9c of the Carmel Hills Charter, allowing the HOA to petition for emergency control over properties that pose existential reputational threat. The audacity was almost artistic. I forwarded it to Erin. She called me immediately, laughing. "Oh, Trevor," she said, "they just stepped on a legal landmine." But I wasn't laughing, because war had officially begun. By week 4, Carmel Hills didn't feel like a neighborhood anymore. It felt like a low-level Cold War with stucco siding and Bluetooth-enabled pitchforks. I couldn't pull into my driveway without someone giving me the side-eye from behind their perfectly trimmed hedges. The hostility was no longer passive-aggressive. It was just aggressive. And Karen? She'd gone from HOA president to full-blown cult leader. Every morning I found new HOA flyers on my doorstep, always anonymous, always folded in half like some clandestine warning. One had a grainy photo of my house with the caption, "Is this the future of our community?" Another just said, "Integrity starts with accountability." But what chilled me wasn't the propaganda, it was how effective it was becoming. Contractors began canceling on me. Landscapers who had been scheduled for weeks claimed they were suddenly unavailable. A solar tech I hired to adjust my panel rotation never showed. I called him, and he admitted sheepishly, "Look, man." Karen got to my boss, said we'd lose future business in the area. Karen had weaponized the HOA's vendor network. The final straw came when my garbage bins weren't emptied, 3 weeks in a row. I called Waste Management and was told politely but firmly that my residential profile had been flagged for review. What does that even mean? They wouldn't say. Even online, the pressure was building. My company's support inbox began receiving strange emails, anonymous complaints, most with the same phrasing. They accused me of being involved in cryptocurrency laundering, of exploiting tax loopholes, of using investor funds to purchase luxury real estate. My CTO texted me in a panic. "WTF is going on, Trev? Are we under audit?" Erin got ahead of it fast. She issued public statements through our firm, started documenting every smear attempt, and filed preliminary paperwork for a defamation suit. "Keep everything," she reminded me daily. Even the garbage notes. Especially the garbage notes, and then came the real break. Late one night, I was watching footage from my newly installed covert backup cameras, the ones I'd placed outside the old HOA utility panel box near my west wall. I'd noticed that area acting weird, motion alerts triggered without any visible activity. That night, I finally caught it. 2 figures moving low, hoodies up. One of them pried open the panel box and did something fast and practiced, with a cable and a handheld device. The other stood lookout, nervously checking the street. I froze the footage and zoomed in. The lookout had a tattoo on his forearm. It was blurry, but visible just long enough for me to make it out. An HOA logo, Carmel Hills, on his skin. I enhanced the clip, saved it, and sent it to Erin with the subject line, "You'll love this." She called me 5 minutes later. We just went from civil to criminal. The next day, we turned the footage over to the sheriff's office. The deputy recognized the tattoo right away. "Name's Kyle Hatch," he said. "Married to Karen's niece. Been on our radar before for a trespassing incident out in Salinas. Never stuck. I felt like vomiting. They were sending family members to sabotage my systems. A detective got assigned, but not before Kyle disappeared. Vanished. Quit his job, left town. No charges filed. Yet. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down. She filed a motion in county court requesting temporary receivership of my home. According to her new filing, Carmel Hills had credible reason to believe that I had used digital infrastructure to interfere with community systems and that my presence in the neighborhood represented a serious reputational liability. Her lawyers cited made-up bylaws, twisted ordinances, and even referenced the smear articles she herself had seeded online as if they were third-party validation. They wanted the court to lock me out of my own house. Erin nearly ripped the filing in half when I handed it to her. She's escalating fast. That means she's scared, she said, pacing her office. But this is dangerous. Judges don't like chaos. If she paints you as a risk, even temporarily, we could be looking at an injunction. I felt the pressure building like water behind glass. I hadn't asked for this war, but now I was waist deep in it. That night, I triple-locked every door and activated full lockdown mode. Lights off, cameras recording, devices encrypted. At 2:48 a.m., an alert woke me up. Motion. Backyard. East corner. I opened the feed and saw a figure climbing the side wall with bolt cutters. I bolted out of bed, grabbed my phone, and hit the police shortcut. I was already moving toward the stairwell when I saw him hesitate, look up, and freeze. The floodlights kicked in. He turned, tried to run, and slipped. The camera got a clean shot of his face as he went down hard. It was Kyle. Again. He was gone by the time the cops arrived, but the footage was clear. Erin made sure it landed on every relevant desk at the sheriff's office the next morning. This time, no one could ignore it. He's done, Erin told me. And Karen just bought herself an accessory charge if we can link her to his orders. I nodded, still wide-eyed, still vibrating with adrenaline. She'll deny everything, I said. She always does, Erin said. Until the evidence buries her. And we were just getting started. The morning of the court hearing felt like stepping into the belly of the machine. We arrived early, Erin in her signature black suit, hair tied back like she was preparing for war, me in a navy jacket and slacks that still smelled faintly of legal prep and cortisol. I hadn't slept. My phone had been vibrating nonstop with media requests, tech blogs, and one especially bold HOA newsletter asking if I'd like to submit a public apology before further escalation. I ignored it all. The courthouse was modest but packed. Word had gotten out, probably thanks to Karen's disciples. A few of them were already gathered on the sidewalk, arms crossed, holding handmade signs like this was some moral crusade. One read, "Protect our community from tech bros." Another simply said, "Money not exactly maturity." Inside, we took our seats. Karen was already there, surrounded by a battalion of HOA lawyers in beige and blue suits, like a funeral parade for common sense. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. Her smirk said it all. The judge, a balding man named Alonzo Dwyer with a reputation for zero tolerance toward weaponized civility, began the session briskly. Erin started with a motion to dismiss the HOA's attempt at receivership. She presented every document, deed, zoning, notarized purchase, and a series of drone photos and archived maps showing my property predated the HOA by decades. Her delivery was razor sharp, but it was the footage that shifted the room. She played the video of Kyle Hatch scaling my wall, bolt cutters in hand, floodlights exploding, and his panicked face caught in high-res clarity. You could hear a few gasps in the courtroom. That, Erin said, turning back to the judge, is not a neighborhood dispute. That is organized sabotage, conducted by a direct relative of the HOA president, who also happens to be the plaintiff attempting to seize my client's home. Karen's lawyers tried to object. Dwyer waved them off. Then came the transcripts. Anonymous whistleblowers from within the HOA had started reaching out to Erin after the sabotage went public. One had leaked internal meeting notes, unedited, unfiltered. The records revealed that the board had never formally voted on any action taken against me. Karen had claimed otherwise. In one line, dated 3 days after I moved in, Karen allegedly said, "We can't have some tech prince rolling in and setting a precedent. If we don't shut this down, next thing you know, we've got influencers with hot tubs on every street." Erin let that quote hang in the air like smoke. Then she dropped the real bomb. A hidden audio recording from a recent HOA leadership call, again leaked, captured Karen discussing how to control the optics of the situation, admitting that if they couldn't find a legal route, we might have to force his hand through perception. Warfare, her exact words. The court went still. Dwyer leaned back in his chair, silent for a long moment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he spoke directly to Karen. Ma'am, are you currently under the impression that the Carmel Hills Homeowners Association operates as a private security firm? Karen opened her mouth to respond, but he cut her off. Because everything I've just seen suggests a targeted campaign of harassment, manipulation, and unlawful interference with private property. If even half of this holds up, you and your board could be facing civil and potentially criminal consequences. Her smile finally cracked. The judge granted Aaron's motion in full. Effective immediately, a temporary restraining order barring the HOA from making any decisions affecting me or my property. Kyle Hatch was to be detained and brought in for questioning. And Karen. She was ordered to surrender her HOA administrative privileges pending further investigation. We walked out of that courtroom like we were untouchable. But the war wasn't over. That night, I got a visitor. I was on my back porch drinking cold brew and watching the last golden rays melt behind the trees when the doorbell rang. Karen. Alone. No clipboard, no entourage, no armor. She looked small. Not physically, but in the way people do when the power drains from their spine. I shouldn't be here, she said, eyes avoiding mine. I stood in the doorway, letting silence answer. I went too far, she muttered. I was trying to protect this place. It's my home, too. Her voice cracked, but she forced it steady. I lost sight. I let resentment drive me. You broke into my life, I said, voice flat. You turned neighbors into strangers and hired family to sabotage me. I know, she whispered. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a key fob. Mine, the master gate access. She held it out. I'll cooperate. With the investigation. With everything. I'm resigning. I already sent the letter. I didn't take the fob. I don't want your apology, I said. I want you out of my life. Karen nodded once silently, then left the fob on the porch rail and walked away. Her car rolled down the hill without headlights. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt uneasy. Something didn't add up. The next morning, my company's finance officer called me, breathless. Trevor, something's wrong. Your business accounts, 2 of them, just got flagged for suspicious transfers. And just like that, the war reignited. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen, eyes glued to my laptop screen, watching transaction logs I didn't authorize drain thousands of dollars from company accounts into shell corporations with vague names like Pacific Horizon Holdings and Civic Harmony Trust. Within minutes, over $400,000 was gone. By morning, our cybersecurity team confirmed what I feared. This wasn't an external breach. No malware, no phishing. The access came from a device previously authenticated on my home network. My network. The same one Karen had demanded access to weeks ago under the guise of needing to calibrate HOA infrastructure compatibility. It hit me like a punch to the chest. She didn't just want to humiliate me or take my property. She wanted to destroy my credibility, sabotage the company. She knew the investors would panic the second fraud alarms went off. I sent every log, every file, and every suspicious IP address to Aaron, who by now had a digital forensics expert on retainer. Within hours, they isolated the attack vector, a smart device, a signal repeater disguised as a wall-mounted signal booster near the HOA utility panel. One of Karen's contractors had installed it. The evidence was damning. I didn't wait. I filed a police report that afternoon. Cyber intrusion, data theft, corporate sabotage. Aaron made sure the DA's office saw everything. The local sheriff's tech unit showed up with a search warrant for the HOA office. They left with hard drives, printed logs, and Karen's personal tablet. The arrest came at sunset. I watched from across the street, arms folded, as deputies knocked on Karen's door. She tried to act confused, then indignant, then furious. But when they cuffed her and read the charges, even her neighbors, some of whom once rallied behind her, stood silent. She was charged with unauthorized access to a computer network, theft by deception, falsification of public documents, malicious defamation, conspiracy to commit fraud. Bail was set high, real high. Local news picked up the story within hours. HOA president arrested in high-profile cybercrime case. My phone exploded with texts, emails, reporters requesting interviews. I ignored them all. It wasn't over. The audit of Carmel Hills HOA began the next week, spearheaded by county officials. Turns out Karen had been running the organization like her personal fiefdom. Unapproved purchases, nepotism contracts, doctored meeting minutes. Residents were shocked. Some apologized. Others just stopped making eye contact. In court, Aaron filed an amended suit. On top of our civil case, she added punitive damages and motioned for full injunctive relief. HOA to be placed under county supervision, Karen permanently barred from holding any administrative position in any homeowners organization statewide. But even with Karen gone, the damage she left behind kept surfacing. 3 different vendors admitted they'd been pressured to blacklist my address. 2 former HOA board members claim Karen had them sign blank resolution templates, which she later filled with anti-me content. A neighbor admitted they were told I was an investigative journalist planted by a federal agency. The paranoia she planted ran deep. 1 week later, Aaron called me with the final piece. "Trevor, we found a money trail. The shell accounts your money went into." They traced back to a trust that Karen's husband used to run. Offshore. Belize. Can we prove she authorized it? We're close. Her niece flipped boom. The case shifted again, now involving federal investigators. We filed for a full criminal complaint, this time under interstate wire fraud and money laundering statutes. Karen's world crumbled. My company's investors stayed calm thanks to transparency and fast damage control. Public support flooded in. Former HOA victims reached out from other states. Some shared similar stories, even offered to testify. The county held a special vote. The result? Carmel Hills HOA dissolved. Control transferred to a temporary oversight committee. I was asked to join. I politely declined. I wasn't in it for power. I just wanted my house, my peace, and maybe a weekend without having to file a restraining order. For the first time in weeks, my house felt quiet. Not just silence, but real, intact quiet. No weird clicks on the network. No slow, deliberate cars idling across the street. No HOA letters, just quiet. That lasted maybe 48 hours. On the 3rd morning, I stepped outside to grab a delivery, and there it was. A massive, professionally printed sign hammered into the greenbelt just off my property line. Carmel Hills community will not be intimidated by outsiders. The HOA was technically dissolved. Karen was facing trial, and still, her loyalists remained. Turns out, when someone builds their kingdom on fear and HOA bylaws, the roots go deep. Karen may have fallen, but the ones who benefited from her rule hadn't vanished. One of them, a guy named Stuart Miller, former treasurer, was holding impromptu meetings on Zoom, positioning himself as the voice of the real residents. He floated a theory that I'd hacked my own accounts for insurance fraud, claimed the government was in my pocket, started calling me the Silicon Squatter. Cute. Aaron called it post-Karen trauma flailing. I called it dangerous. Then came the smear campaign. Anonymous emails sent to my startup's board members. Edited videos cut to make me look erratic. One even used a deepfake filter to splice me into a video of a party I never attended, complete with staged drug use and music I hadn't listened to since college. They were sloppy, but designed to raise just enough doubt. Aaron compiled it all. We pushed for cease and desist orders and digital forensics. But the truth is, this wasn't legal warfare anymore. This was culture warfare, social perception, reputation sabotage, HOA-style guerrilla tactics in the digital age, so I fought back differently. I uploaded a video, just me, in my living room, no script, no polish. I told the full story, start to now. I showed footage of the gate sabotage, Kyle's break-in, the court rulings, the arrest, the smear attempts. I laid it all out with timestamps, legal filings, uncut audio. The video went viral in 48 hours. It wasn't just the HOA crowd watching. It hit the startup world, tech blogs, civil rights forums. Hashtags popped up, memes. People started sharing their own HOA horror stories. A few even started tagging local officials, demanding legislative reform. The real shift came when former Carmel Hills residents started speaking out. One woman said Karen fined her for having too many flowers. Another said she was forced to paint her house twice in 6 months after the board reconsidered the palette. A man said Karen ordered his son's lemonade stand shut down for unregulated commerce, and suddenly I wasn't the anomaly. I was the mirror. Public support exploded. Donations flooded into a legal fund Aaron set up, not for me, but for other homeowners fighting HOA abuse. National media picked up the story. I did a short interview on a tech podcast, then a segment on morning TV. I didn't love the attention, but I knew its power. Meanwhile, Karen's bail was revoked. Turns out she'd tried to contact 3 HOA members using a burner phone. Witness tampering. They brought her back in cuffs, this time without the smug lipstick or performative scarf. The DA's office formally filed expanded charges, federal ones. Erin looked more satisfied than I'd ever seen her. But just when things were settling, my office security called. "Hey, Trevor, we had a guy come by today. Said he used to work for the Carmel Hills HOA. Left this for you." It was a flash drive, no label. Back at home, I opened it in a sandboxed machine. Inside, dozens of folders, audio, spreadsheets, photos, meeting minutes, a full digital paper trail, Karen's secrets, hidden payments, backdoor deals, internal blacklists, confidential memos, and one folder simply titled Next Target. The first name on the list? Mine. The second, a woman named Dr. Susan Eddington, property owner, civil rights attorney. The folder included a plan to discredit her over non-compliant landscaping and potential hoarding violations. My blood ran cold. They weren't just after me. I was just the latest. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to wrap my head around the sheer volume of dirt packed onto that flash drive. It wasn't just HOA business. It was a full-blown operation. Target lists, psychological profiles, coordination emails with private contractors, even budget spreadsheets labeled Community Integrity Enforcement, with thousands of dollars allocated to surveillance, reputation, management, and, my favorite, containment protocols. This wasn't a nosy HOA anymore. This was a personal fiefdom built on paranoia and control, masquerading as neighborhood unity. And somehow, I'd stepped right into its path simply by existing. I handed the drive over to Erin. She didn't even flinch. "We'll get it entered as evidence." This might move the feds to widen the scope. RICO territory. RICO. As in organized crime. The next 2 weeks unfolded like a storm rolling in from all sides. The county convened a special session to determine whether Carmel Hills HOA, now officially leaderless, should be placed under permanent oversight or dissolved entirely. In that hearing, over a dozen residents came forward with statements. Some cried, some cursed. Most were just exhausted. When my turn came, I didn't go in angry. I went in clear. I laid out how a community structure built on volunteerism had been perverted into a tool for exclusion and surveillance. How I was targeted for being young and independent. How my property rights were threatened, my name dragged through mud, my business nearly ruined. And how, through it all, Karen Hatch and her circle weaponized bureaucracy like a scalpel. The vote was unanimous. Carmel Hills HOA dissolved. Control transferred to a neutral county board. An audit team assigned. All future policy to be publicly posted with oversight from an independent housing ethics committee. But that wasn't the end. A federal grand jury indicted Karen Hatch on a total of 15 charges, including cyber intrusion, conspiracy to commit fraud, falsification of legal documents, attempted identity theft, and obstruction of justice. Bail denied. Erin negotiated our civil suit to settlement, $1.8 million, plus public admission of wrongdoing by the HOA entity. I gave interviews, not for attention, just to make sure people knew the signs, how it starts small, a letter, a warning, a request to conform, and how quickly it can evolve into something colder, sharper, and infinitely more personal. The day the final ruling came through, I got a visit, not from Karen, from her husband. I didn't know what to expect. Rage, denial, maybe some empty threats. But he just stood there, older than he looked on paper, eyes bloodshot. "She never used to be like this," he said quietly. "She got addicted to control. Thought she was saving the neighborhood. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to." That night, I walked through my home for the first time without looking over my shoulder. The air felt cleaner. My tech was running smooth again. The cameras were mine. The locks were mine. The silence was real. And yet, one thought lingered. What if I hadn't had the money to fight back? What if I didn't know the law? What if I had just handed over the keys, like they wanted? I couldn't let that be someone else's story, so I donated a chunk of the settlement, nearly half, to create a national fund for young homeowners facing HOA harassment, legal support, advocacy, education. I even gave it a name, Fortify, because your home should never feel like a war zone. I never heard from Karen again. Last I checked, her trial was ongoing. The internet has a long memory. So do I. My house is still here, still mine. And now, when I sit on my back porch, coffee in hand, overlooking the California hills, I smile, because I didn't just win. I kept what was already mine.